Without a doubt, SpongeBob is one of the cartoons that has made me laugh the most in my life. But did you know that in some scenes of the show, if you pause at the right moment, you'll see something even funnier? One example is in an episode where SpongeBob has the brilliant idea of using his own eyes to flip the Krabby Patties he's grilling. The catch is that the patties are so hot that his eyes literally catch on fire. And remember, this is happening underwater. Seriously, SpongeBob is funny even when it makes no sense. To put out the fire in his eyes, he grabs the first thing his arms can reach and throws it on them. But the problem is that it's mustard, so SpongeBob's eyes start melting right away. And if you pause in the middle of all this, you'll catch this hilarious and grotesque scene of SpongeBob's eyes turning into mush. I laughed so hard when I paused the scene right at this moment. And you? If you laughed, you've already lost. But if you haven't, just wait. By the end of this video, I'm sure you'll be laughing a lot. So jump in, because another episode of Cinewave is starting now. In the episode Face Freeze, we see SpongeBob and his best friend Patrick Star in a kind of competition to see who can make the ugliest face. And let me tell you, it was definitely hard to pick a winner. We see the two friends making the most bizarre faces. And if you slow the scene down, you'll see the exact moment when SpongeBob is in the middle of one of his transformations to make a face, and you'll come across this incredibly ugly image where SpongeBob's head looks like an anvil that got run over by a tractor and his eyes are completely deformed. If Plankton saw this, he would definitely never want to steal the Krabby Patty formula again. In another episode, set in the same Bikini Bottom, we see SpongeBob and Patrick in a wrestling ring, both sponsored by Mr. Krabs. The catch is that the greedy owner of the Krusty Krab finds out that contrary to what he thought, he's actually going to lose money on that fight, and at that moment, he just freaks out. And if you do like us and pause at the right moment, you'll catch the exact frame where Mr. Krabs' eyes are completely stretched out, while his mouth is wide open with his tongue sticking out. Moral of the story? If you don't want to laugh a lot, never tell Mr. Krabs that he's going to lose money. Still talking about the character who loves money more than anyone under the sea, in another episode, we see that when Mr. Krabs realizes that Squidward was signing plates as if they were works of art, SpongeBob's boss gets so angry that his eyes, arms, and legs instantly disintegrate. And if you pause at the right moment, you'll be able to see exactly when it happens and how funny it looks to see Mr. Krabs' body parts in tiny pieces like paper. Detail: he's floating in the air while all this is happening. It was definitely strange, but hilarious at the same time. And if you also love SpongeBob, prove it and comment below #Crab in reference to the money-loving boss of the square pants. In the episode where Mr. Krabs makes SpongeBob his gift buyer for Mrs. Puff, at one point, the Krusty Krab employee gets frustrated because his boss wants him to buy the most expensive gifts, yet scolds him for spending too much money. At this moment, SpongeBob goes into a kind of psychotic breakdown, rapidly moving his legs while simultaneously grabbing his head and pulling his own eyes in one of the weirdest scenes I've ever seen in the show. If you pause right when he pulls his eyes out, you'll see this bizarre image of SpongeBob with 3 legs while his hands stretch his eyes as if they were made of rubber. You can even see inside his head at the same time. Man, that was really weird, but also a lot of fun. When Plankton creates a creature that is an improved version of Mr. Krabs, it turns out that the version is so good that he ends up becoming the owner of the Krusty Krab. As a result, both the villain and SpongeBob's ex-boss ends up as employees of the new owner and are put together to clean the bathrooms. The thing is, they hate each other, and the fight gets so intense that they accidentally burst into the stall where one of the customers is using the toilet. And the whole scene happens so fast that it's hard to catch all the details, but if you pause at the right moment, you'll see the look of complete despair on the Krusty Krab customer's face, who was just trying to do his business while reading a gossip magazine. Poor guy, I actually felt a little sorry for him, but at the same time, it was hilarious when I noticed that little detail about the unlucky customer. In one of the most claustrophobic episodes of SpongeBob, we see the friends trying to save Sandy the squirrel's life as she runs out of air. And at one point, Mr. Krabs reveals that there are some oxygen bubbles inside his shell and she can suck them out. With no other choice in this desperate situation, we see her simply chomping down on the character's head while SpongeBob pumps Mr. Krabs' arm like he's pushing oxygen into the Texas squirrel. And when you pause this scene, you can see how funny SpongeBob's face and Sandy's inflated head look. I've never seen the squirrel look like that before. Have you? In that same episode, we see that just before, Sandy's situation was even more dire, as she was completely out of air, to the point point where she changed color. And this is definitely a scene where, when I paused to take a closer look, I noticed how the animators made her eyes bulge out completely, filled with blood vessels, making it clear that Sandy was really on the verge of suffocating. Honestly, I felt really bad for her, but Patrick's dumb face had me laughing out loud. In another episode, we see SpongeBob getting a splinter stuck in his finger. And if this has ever happened to you, you know how much it hurts. As we can see in the scene, SpongeBob tries to pull the splinter out and is in a lot of pain. And despite how much he's suffering, I have to admit that when I paused the scene and saw SpongeBob's face, I also noticed how the skin on his finger was stretching and the splinter wouldn't come out. I laughed a lot. Good thing this is just a cartoon, or else I'd feel really sorry for the poor guy. And if you love SpongeBob and other cartoons, here's a tip straight from Bikini Bottom. Subscribe to our channel. That way you won't miss our next videos, which are going to be amazing too. Even though SpongeBob is one of the funniest characters in the animation world, I have to say that sometimes he really manages to scare me. And I'm not even talking about that Halloween episode where he showed up at the Krusty Krab party with just his brain and eyes, but rather about the time when Mrs. Puff was giving her version of how SpongeBob interrupted her while she was giving a driving lesson to another student. She says that the SquarePants character showed up with a terrifying expression, implying that somehow he was going to ruin the driving instructor's day. At that moment, we see SpongeBob cornering the other student with a sinister villain's face. Of course, all of this was in Mrs. Puff's head, who really doesn't like SpongeBob, but without a doubt, this is a scene I'll hardly forget. It really seems like Mr. Krabs has the ability to make parts of his body explode and then mysteriously reappear. The catch is that every time this happens, it's related to money, as you probably know very well. In the episode where three hippies are at the Krusty Krab and don't pay their bill, when the three come out of the pot on SpongeBob's grill, the Krusty Krab owner gets so angry that we see his eyes inflating and exploding like a party balloon. And if you do like us and pause right when the explosion happens, you'll catch this super weird scene where Mr. Krabs' eyes are still kind of intact but already in the process of exploding, which made the scene even funnier. In the episode where SpongeBob has his brand new leaf blower, he uses it to do absolutely everything. One of the things he does is clean Squidward's sand-covered face. The problem is that the device's power is much stronger than expected, so when SpongeBob does this, we see him blow his coworker's face so hard that it completely peels back. And when we look at the exact frame, we can see how Squidward's skin even pulls away from his eyes. Seriously, this was definitely one of the creepiest scenes of SpongeBob involving his grumpy neighbor. In one of Plankton's failed attempts to get the Krabby Patty recipe, the villain sneaks into Mr. Krabs' bathroom. The problem is that SpongeBob's boss mistakes the little evil creature for his razor while taking a shower. So the eternal rival of the Krusty Krab owner ends up with his mouth completely filled with Mr. Krabs' beard hair, and he spits it all out to avoid choking. And at that moment, I have to admit that I felt a little sorry for Plankton. But just a little. And when we slow down the scene, you can see how bad the situation really was for the Chum Bucket owner, and he was definitely having a rough day. But unlike Plankton, I had a lot of fun with today's video, and definitely had a good laugh too. And since we want you to keep having fun, we've picked out two amazing videos for you to check out right now that are popping up on your screen. Watch both, and then let me know which one you liked best. Deal? Thanks, and see you next time.